Greetings of peace. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you live in. Welcome to podcast Thoughtful Thursdays at Noon with Dr. Aya. And today we're talking about leadership development, adult development, how they're intertwined. And we've touched on this topic in our last podcast session. Today we're going to go deeper into adult development and the different theories out there. Specifically, talk about action logics and how their implications in everyday life. But before I do that, I want to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Aya Akeri. I'm just a young lady, an adventurer, a wayfarer, crossing continents and cultures, only to discover the truth that unites us all. Our interconnection with each other in the universe. Once transitions, I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and spent the first half of my childhood in Tripoli, North Africa, and the second half in Dublin, Ireland. And you don't have to be a cross-culture specialist to imagine that's like living between worlds. I'm a certified leadership coach, credentialed by the International Coaching Federation. I'm an organizational leadership specialist and an emotional resilience coach, a mentor, published author, and professional speaker. My goal is to transform the conception of leadership into one of inner peace, wisdom, and creation-based thinking. I empower leaders to lead from their souls through conscious awareness via coaching and mentoring. I have ambitious, professional executives and change leaders to excel. I help them beat burnout, enhance their performance and productivity, and master the art of work-life balance. So what is development? It's described as the expansion of one's ability to differentiate oneself from others. However, today, because there's so much information that there's a lot of details, so I decided to share the information using a slide. Audio-visual aids might help people understand what I'm trying to tell them. So I will try to share my slide now to go deeper into the different stages so you can see the different stages of adult development. There is Tourvey's action logics. There is Keegan's developmental stages. Well, he describes adult development as a number of stages that you go through, so it's almost like steps of stairs. There's also Berger's forms of mind, which we'll touch on maybe next session. Today, we're going to focus on Tourvey's action logic. So I'm going to share my screen and let's see. And we are going to say this one. Let's see if this is the right one. Maybe we can do this. Okay, so I hope you and Tourvey's action logics. What I like about them is that they're flexible. So he described the developmental stages as action logics in an effort to reflect the dynamic and multiple dimensions of the person's experience, including reasoning and behavior, because it's not a simple one step. Human development is non-linear, meaning that it does not just go in one direction. It goes horizontally, vertically, and it's fluid and dynamic. So we move up and down depending on the situation, how we're feeling, on different factors, and therefore there are multiple dimensions. Action logic comes in. It makes it easier to understand that there's more than just one linear movement up and down. And then also it includes reasoning and behavior. So there is more to it than just a simple equation where it's just stages, because it's more than stages. They're fluid, they're dynamic, and they're cumulative, so they build on each other. And we can actually fluctuate. There is a center of gravity where we are most of the time, and then there is the fallback. So sometimes when you're challenged, you can fall back to a lower stage of development because you're just basically not finding your bearings. You're just off kilter. And then also there is the higher level, which would be right above your center of gravity, and this is the developmental stage that you, or the action logic that you aspire to reach, will usually be the next level. So the idea of action logic allows for greater flexibility, and gradation is active description of the interconnected phases of human development, because they are interconnected, they're fluid, we move through them up and down, horizontally, vertically, So it makes it easier to describe it with this idea of action logic. And it mirrors the fluctuations for human progress throughout life, because it's just not, it's fallback, peaks and valleys, ups and downs. So that's why it's so fluid and it fluctuates so much that action logic makes it easier to understand. So here are the different action logics were described by Torre, and it's good to I mean, how do you know which action logic you operate from most of the time? Because each one of us has a way of knowing that filters out experiences ourselves, of others, in relationships. So these action logics or our stage of development, it filters out how we experience ourselves, how we interpret our experience, and also how we interpret our experience of others and our relationships, and also even our interpretation of our world around us depends on our. So if you look at it, opportunist is actually the lowest, and alchemical is the highest. So when you're at the opportunist stage, they win at all costs. So they have a short time horizon. They flout power and sexuality. They treat it with disdain. They reject feedback. So they can get really defensive. They're not interested in getting feedback from others. They have hostile humor. So it's almost like a jungle kind of the law of the jungle kind of mentality. They can be deceptive and manipulative because they want to win at all costs. So they're willing to deceive others and manipulate to get what they want. And then when problems happen, they externalize blame. So it's never their fault. It's always someone else's fault. Luck is central for them, and then the punishment rules. So if they are dealing with their own children or their own pets or whatever, then they focus on punishment. So focus on fear. It's almost like a fear-led kind of leadership. And they view rule as a loss of freedom. So they don't like following rules and regulation. And it's an eye for an eye ethic. So that's the most basic level. And it correlates to different, there are other levels in or stages in development in other leadership developmental theories. And they all have that level, which is the basic. That's just like the lowest level, right? Where you just win at all costs. And then you have the next one, which is it represents a higher level of consciousness. So does it ascend in the meaning making capacity or the level of understanding? And you have a diplomat. And the diplomat is a person that fits really well in the group. Say they observe rules, they avoid inner and outer conflict. So they conform to society, and they're willing to suppress their own desires so that they can please the group. So they have a really strong loyalty to the group, to the point where they will actually silence their own voice. They seek membership. Membership is very important for them. And there is the right versus wrong attitude. So there aren't their way of looking at life is like, right? They don't see the gray in between. And they're very status conscious, and that's why it's really important for them to fit in the group. So from my experience, where I was studying these different developmental levels, I was examining a group in real life and looking at how people are responding to the group dynamics. That there was some members, right, and they knew that sometimes the group's actions were not right, or they're not compliant with common courtesy, right? However, their loyalty to the group was strong. They did not want to be cast out. So they were willing to suppress their own desires, their own understanding of the world, so they can conform to the group. It was their status in the group, or their appearance and their status in the group, was very important to them. So they worked towards group standards. And you will see these people in different kinds of groups, different parts of the world, and it's the same. This person, like when you see them, if you meet them at an individual level and you have a relationship with them separately, and they're a nice person and they know what's right and wrong, but then when they come, almost like switch to groupthink, and they're willing to do whatever to conform to the group. and it's almost you see like a different side to that person. And then we move on to the expert. So they are experts are interested in problem solving, as you can see from the term used. So problem solving via data, critical of other, they are critical of others themselves. So they won't just try to conform. They are willing to analyze themselves. They're analyzing others. They have an opinion, and then they choose efficiency over effectiveness. They tend to be perfectionists, and they value decisions based on merit. So they like if you compare it to a diplomat, the diplomat will do whatever the group wants them to do. So their decision is based on loyalty to the group. Whereas here with an expert, it's based on merit. So problem solving, they have really good problem solving skills, and they pick the or prior the best course of action. They want their performance to stand out. They are aware of alternative constructions and problem resolution, but can be dogmatic. So they are aware that there is more than one way to solve a situation, more than one way to approach a situation, but they can be expert, and therefore they only receive feedback from craft masters. So they won't receive, like with the opportunists, they won't receive feedback full stop, that they're defensive. But when you look at the expert, they will receive that feedback, but they tend to be dogmatic. So it has to be from a craft master. Not everybody's good enough to give them feedback, basically. Then you move on to your level. I would have liked to actually this image to be the other way around, because it's like you start at the bottom and you go higher. So as you go higher, you go to the person becomes an achiever. So you transcend your current level of consciousness and you become an achiever. As you can see, achiever, they're high achieving, they focus on working hard. So there is result and effectiveness oriented. Leadership management, they go like task oriented. So it's very important for them to achieve the task at hand. They are goal driven, so they have long term goals, and so they're goal driven. So they are concerned with issues of ethics and justice, and they prioritize work tasks. They're future inspired. So they look forward towards the future, they're drawn towards learning, and they seek mutuality in relationship. So, like if you compare them to a diplomat where they're just trying to fit in, right? These people, the achievers, they want a mutual relationship. So it's like, I treat you right, you treat me right. I'm not going to conform to rules, kind of thing. So they seek mutuality in relationships. They're aware of personal patterns of behaviors, and they feel guilty if they don't meet their own standards. However, they are blind to their own shadow. So they don't really see their blind spots. They lack the wisdom. They're not ready to see their blind spots, and they tend to chase time. So they're high achievers. So they chase time. They're always wanting to task oriented. They want things. Now we go to the higher level, which is redefining as we ascend through the levels of the action logics. They're collaborative. So redefining is collaborative. They are tolerant of individual differences, or actually more like embracing or open to individual differences. They're aware of context and contingency. They may challenge group norms. So redefining in a group, if you put the redefining person in a group, they won't fit in like a diplomat. They will challenge the group norm. They're aware of owning their own a perspective and inquiring and open to feedback. So they are open to feedback. They have their own voice, and they're willing to challenge group norms for that voice. They seek independent, creative work. So they're creative and they like to be independent. They're attracted by difference and change. So they are willing to form a relationship with people that are different so they can learn other ways of looking at things, different perspectives. So they're not challenged by something that's different, which could be a genius or a diplomat. They may become something of a maverick. They focus on present and historical context. So redefining, they are independent. So when you start at the top, opportunists and diplomats, they tend to be dependent. They're dependent on the group. They're dependent on their community. And then as you go higher, you become more dependent, like the expert and achiever. And redefining, they are independent. So they are separating themselves from the group. But they have not reached the stage of the next two levels, which are interdependent. So they are not only are they dependent, but they're have also their own voice, but they're also relate to others, and they're open and and they're open to different ways of looking at the world, and they see the unity in the differences. So the next level would be transforming. So with transforming, not only are they goal driven, they are also process driven. Okay, so they say in management, they say the management grid, they say like task oriented, people oriented. Transforming are both task and people oriented. Strategic time horizon, they're system conscious, so they're aware of they can see the big picture, and they enjoy a variety of roles and they tend to do well in them. They recognize the importance of principle, judgment. They're engaged in complex interweave of relationships. So they are interdependent, and that's where interdependence comes along. They authoring their own voice. They are aware of their own personal traits and shadows. So they are aware of their blind spots. They fit really well into the system. So they see the picture, they see the different system, and they integrate well without losing themselves. They place high value on individuality. It's very important for them. Growth is important, and self fulfillment is important. And they also place value on historical moments. Then we go into the last one, which is the alchemical. They are alert to the theater of action, so they have an even more broader and encompassing level worldview, looking at the world. So they are alert to the theater of action. They embrace common humanity, so they have love for other humans, and they disrupt paradigms of thought and action. So they tend to be thought leaders. They tend to be thought leaders. So they do disrupt thought and paradigms of thought and action, and dispel notions of heroic action. So they don't believe in this superhero person. They see the humanity in everybody, and they see the uniqueness in everyone. They're deeply internalized. They have a deeply internalized, held with an empty mind. I would say a clear mind, a quiet mind, because the quiet mind helps you see with clarity, which is what we try to achieve through leadership emotion resilience coaching, is that we're trying to reach that quiet mind where you have calm and clarity, and you're able to operate from a place of wisdom and from a place of, they see light and dark, order and mess. So they see the unity within what used to seem like differences. So they see the importance between and their interrelationship between dark and light, order and mess. So they treat time and events as symbolic. So look at life from a higher, just in a higher spirit, maybe even a spiritual level or a higher level of understanding. They analogical, metaphorical. So they use analogies and metaphors to explain or to explain how they see the world, or to relate to others too. So not merely linear, digital, literal. For them, it's more than that. So maybe an expert might see it as digital, literal, or linear, but for an alchemical, there's just so much more. And this reminds me of the quote by the 13th century, the great, the 13th century great Muslim scholar and poet Rumi, where he has this poem, and it kind of reminds me of the alchemical. And it says, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other does not make any sense." So they see the unity within the differences. So out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. So if you compare that to a diplomat, where it's like they have right versus wrong, black, white, alchemical can see all the different colors in the spectrum. So right and wrong, they are there, but their ability to see beyond, so their ability to hear beyond the words and listen for a feeling. And they experience people, relationships, and life at a deep. So moving on to the next slide, and you can see that they are described as action logics because it's actually more of a wave or a spiral than it is a step. So as you move higher, you go from dependent, which would be like more the optimist diplomat, then they become independent, where expert achiever, redefining, And then interdependence, transforming alchemical. That there's ironic. That's another level that isn't. I'm just using the seven leadership action logics, but there are different theories and different terminology that's used, but they all reflect a similar kind of pattern of, a spiral or a wave, and it goes in a vertical, horizontal direction. It's fluid. We go up and down, and it's cumulative. And you look here in the other diagram, it's like towards timely leadership. So as you're a dependent, you're conforming to society, to rules, to groups, and my own desires, and your own voice. Independent, contacting, they own their own voice. They author their own voice. They're self-authoring, and and they are independent, so they will not conform to group norms. They might even challenge them. But at some stages, like the achiever can be a maverick, you were saying, and so that there is a downside to being independent. As you go interdependent, that's at even a higher level because they're transforming. They transform themselves. They're also able to transform their team, their organization, their society, and they're interdependent. So they have these relationship, complex interweaving relationships with the world around them, with other people. So if we look at this is a summary of Torporay's 7 leadership action logics. So here, descending order. So I'm starting at the top, which is alchemical, and that's the highest. And they integrate material, spiritual, and societal. Actually, I might just read them from the bottom because it's just because each one builds on the other one. So if you start at the bottom, your opportunist wins for self in any way possible. It just makes it so much easier to remember. It's just a summary. Opportunists, if you can't remember the traits, it's like win for self in any way possible. And sometimes even with people that are in the transforming level, we actually go down to the opportunists. If we're in a state where it's a survival state and that's the only way we can survive, then sometimes we can actually move down to the action logic, which is very interesting. That's why it's fluid. It's a fluid movement. Then we move. Then the next level would be diplomat, which wants to belong and fit in. So loyalty to the group. That's the most important thing for them. Expert focuses on logic and expertise, as you can see from the terminology. Achiever is driven by personal and team achievements. So they are high achievers, they focus on achievement. Redefining, they reframe complex problems in unique ways. Then you go to transforming, generational transformation. So they transform themselves, so they're self-transforming, but they also transform their team, their organization. Now we go to alchemical, because alchemy is like changing metal, different types of metal to gold. So that's why the whole idea of alchemical. They integrate material, spiritual, and societal transformations. So they're agents of change, and they have seeing the possibilities and potentials of people around them, their team, especially if they're leading as their leader and it's in their team, they're able to help them transform their team. I'm sorry. Now I'm going to try to exit. Oh, right. Okay. Where does it say stop sharing? Right. Right, so I'm just going to go back to, I haven't lost you there. Go back here. And, right, stop sharing. Okay, I hope you found that interesting. So I was kind of looking at the different developmental levels and their implications in everyday life, because from my experience, just studying this adult development theory and just looking at situations where I've met, because I mean, theory is good, but once you see it in everyday life, it makes a difference. So part of the training was do a project where I analyze a group and look at the different dynamics, and that was very interesting because like it just happened that I had moved to a new place and I've met different people, and there were different group dynamics, and I could see people that were acting from a diplomat action logic, where okay, she feels that the group, like she's a wonderful person to be around when she's not with the group, but then she shifts into the group think when she's there, and it's like for her she will silence her own voice just to fit in with the group. But then you have someone else that might be even at a lower level of action logic, and she doesn't even see the wrong that the group will do. For her, everything the group does is right. regardless. And that's where you go into us versus them mentality. So us is like we could do anything and it's fine. Our group is fine, and then use different standards for people that are classified as other or out of the group. And these dynamics they play in team teams work, just even in the community and society. And if you can notice these people, then you could see how the dynamic of relationships are playing or the dynamics within the group. And I think the most important thing is to even because you have your center of gravity, which is the action logic where you operate from. So which one are you operating from? And then there's the fallback action logic. So if you get challenged sometimes and we don't handle it well, then we can react and we can actually fall back to a lower action logic than the one that's our center mode of operation. And then there's the one that's just next to it, which is higher than our current meaning making capacity, and that would be the action logic we're aspiring to be. So that would be our next move. And the more if you look at the next action logic and see the qualities and traits, it helps you once you see it and recognize it and become aware of them, these qualities, then you're more likely to mimic them. And interestingly, which is something I'm going to share, there's a study that showed that people that are mimicking or moving to the next action logic are more likely to get the promotion. Because when you change the dynamic of your relationship and your situation and status in society tends to change in turn, which is very interesting. So that's the whole idea. The actual that part where you had the 7 leadership, the summary was in the Harvard Business Review. So they kind of summed it up to make it easier to understand. So it's hard to remember everything about the different action logics, but it's easy to just kind of sum it up in one sentence. And it kind of helps in terms of the leadership styles and skills of different leaders. As you go higher up, then you're moving towards higher or greater levels of transformational leadership. As you go down, then you're like, let's say, in the opportunist leadership through fear. And that could be even at home. Like if you're a parent and if you're stuck in the opportunist action logic, then you're not going to be a good parent because you'll just be punishment, punishment rules, an eye for an eye ethic. It'd be fear-based kind of leadership. But as you rise, you are a better leader. You become more transformational, more independent, and then towards interdependent. And you can actually help transform society and transform organizations. Um, I hope that this was not too much for you. I tried to simplify the diagrams and the slides so that you can follow me. And I would love to hear your feedback and takeaways. And if it's YouTube, please, can you like and share? And yeah, it'll be nice to see if you could reflect on your current action logic. Where are you operating from right now and aspire to be? Because coaching and mentoring can definitely help you with that, because coaching is called evoking awareness. So it helps you see your blind spots. It helps you rise to a higher level of consciousness. And that's how I got interested in coaching. Again, this is Dr. Aya, certified leadership coach, organizational leadership consultant, emotional resilience coach and mentor, published author and speaker. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day. By the way, my book is out, Lead From Your Soul, The 4 Worldviews of Inspiring Leaders. It was launched May 1st of 2023. It's available on Amazon. If you look it up by name, Dr. Aya Carey, or by the book's name, Lead From Your Soul, The 4 Worldviews of Inspiring Leaders. You can also go to my website, www.drayacarey.com, and download my free goal setting workbook and goal setting guidebook. And have a wonderful day.